All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 21, and today we're going to talk about backgrounds. And I'm going to take a drink. So, this little kind of vlogging series, I've been talking about game design and things that I find important when looking at an RPG. And what has become increasingly more common since probably 4th edition, which launched, I think, what was it, 2008, 2009, is the idea that when you create a character, you choose 3 different parts of the character. You have the race or the lineage, the class, and then you also have this thing called a background. And backgrounds have not really been a thing before, but starting with, I want to say, I think it was in the Dark Sun campaign setting, and then it got expanded with the Essentials line. Basically, they added a new way to kind of customize your character in the 4th edition D&D, by allowing you to take what was called a background. And what a background did in the 4th edition was basically give you a little bit more flavor for your character, and generally it would also give you some sort of benefit. The vast majority of, and I think some backgrounds existed before then, and all they ever gave was they would give you bonuses to a couple skills. And then the Dark Sun version came through and the Essentials came through, and then they started giving you abilities. Like I remember there was one that allowed, it was something like I think the background is called Blackstaff Apprentice, which if you're familiar with the Forgotten Realms, the Blackstaff is basically the kind of highest ranking mage in Waterdeep. And it's named after Kelburn Blackstaff, who started a group called the Silver Stars and a bunch of other things. He was a chosen of Mystra, but he and Elminster didn't always see eye to eye. So he has his own tower in Waterdeep called Blackstaff Tower, and he has his own, kind of collection of mages. Now, he died, but the Blackstaff, which was his actual staff, became a title. It would get passed on and stuff like that. So, the Blackstaff Apprentice was literally that. You were an apprentice to whomever the Blackstaff was at that point. And one of the things that you got is you got this special ability that allowed you to cast Magic Missile as a minor action instead of a standard action. And in 4th edition, Magic Missile was just auto damage. You didn't fire multiple missiles. It was a cantrip that wizards could learn. And what it was you would just use your action and you would do damage. So it was really simple and it was remarkably effective. But it was a cantrip. It took your standard action. And the Blackstaff, taking the Blackstaff background, let you cast it as a minor action. So you could still do your main action and then just fire off a magic missile as just a little bit of extra damage. It wasn't a like crap ton of damage or anything like that, but it was extra damage, so that was nice, and it was a use for your minor action. So that, to my understanding, I believe that was the first time, as far as D&D was concerned, that backgrounds started becoming a thing. And then when 5th edition came about, backgrounds became an essential part of character creation. But the officially written materials didn't really take backgrounds into consideration when they were planning adventures and things like that. And so the original version of backgrounds was actually pretty cool. And it actually was remarkably useful in game. Like, one of my favorite backgrounds from the Player's Handbook is what's called the Charlatan. And the reason I liked it so much is the background feature that you got from it was effectively you could forge any document you'd ever seen. And that is a massive, massive deal. Now, it has no real beneficial use in combat, and it would be very, very easy for a DM to just make it completely pointless by just never using documents at all in the game. However, anyone that has done anything involving government, business, anything remotely official, knows that documentation runs the world. And even if we go back to the kind of medieval setting that most fantasy games are set on, documents were still a really, really useful thing. If you've ever watched the movie A Knight's Tale, which is amazing, one of the things that was required to joust and participate in tournaments was you had to have a patents of nobility, which is basically just something that proved that you were a noble. And part of the plot of A Knight's Tale is William having to find a way to effectively forge a patents of nobility. And that's the reason why he gets in touch with Geoffrey Chaucer and all these other cool things. It's an amazing, amazing movie with just a stacked cast of really brilliant actors. Yeah, so the ability to perfectly, and it's not just, you can try to, the ability is you can perfectly forge documents that you have seen, is unbelievably useful in a ton of different situations. But stuff like that was just never really implemented. It was never referenced in any of the official stuff. And so what ended up happening is nobody used their backgrounds except as a way to get some additional skills at character creation, and then they promptly forgot about them. Which is why, starting with, I think it was like Strixhaven, or maybe a little bit before that, they started changing how backgrounds worked, where backgrounds now give you a free feat, which completely changed how everything worked. And I'm still not a particularly large fan of backgrounds giving you a feat. I think it goes against the design of 5th edition. But kind of going into the whole idea of game design and backgrounds in general, the idea of a background is basically your race is generally going to give you something to do with your attributes. In a lot of different games, it's also going to have somehow tie to your hit points or something similar to that. In D&D, it ties to your speed, stuff like that. So that's physical. Your class is going to give you all of your combat abilities and all of your kind of class fantasy abilities. So that's where you're going to get that. The background, though, is really intended to help you be able to customize your skills in some way. And that's what we see in everyone else that tries to implement backgrounds, is this idea that by having this additional thing, you can create a very different kind of ranger. Like, good example, my first D&D 5th edition character that I played for a really, really long time wasn't the first one I ever played, but it was the one that I spent the most time playing. I leveled them from level, they started at level 5 and went all the way up to level 17 in the Adventurers League. What that particular character was a monk that I took the Way of Shadow class and basically turned him kind of into a ninja. However, I took the criminal background, and I took it specifically because the background for this character was they were an assassin. So I'm like, well, criminal and assassin is one of those. But one of the really, really useful things about that is it gave me proficiency with thieves' tools. And so my shadow monk, because they were already dexterity based, could effectively fill in for a rogue in just about any party. And I had, I even had situations, like I remember one game specifically where this guy was playing a rogue, and it was a higher level game, like we were in tier 3. So this guy was playing a rogue, and I was playing my shadow monk, and everything the rogue could do, I could do better. and it started to frustrate the rogue a little bit because it's like, well, why can't you? The only thing that the rogue could do that I couldn't was they could out damage me 100 ways from Sunday. But all the kind of sneaky stuff, like whenever we needed to sneak in somewhere, he's like, oh, I can do that. I'm like, I can do it as well. He's like, well, how are you going to, like, you don't have expertise in stealth? I said, no, but I have passed without a trace, which gives me a plus 10 to stealth checks, which is significantly better than anything your expertise is ever going to do for you. And I can give it to everybody in the party as long as they're close to me. The guy tried to do something where he found a chest, and this was in an Adventures League game, and so kind of one of the unwritten rules in the Adventures League, because these characters have to kind of continue, is you don't steal from the party. And depending on exactly what you were stealing and how you were stealing, you theoretically could get kicked out of that character could be kicked out of the Adventures League if you're doing what's called disruptive behavior. And so this person playing the rogue found a chest full of gems, which is how we get money. Like any money that you find in an Adventures League game, at the very end, it's divvied out evenly. Well, he decided that, well, I'm not going to tell anyone that I found this. I'm going to say, yeah, the chest was empty. And all of us knew the chest wasn't empty. We just heard the DM describe it because you don't steal from party members. So there was no reason for him to secretly tell the rogue what he found. And so I immediately go, yeah, I don't believe him in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to insight check him. And we got into this little argument. It's like, well, you have no reason to insight check me. This is metagaming. I'm like, no, you just went off, found a chest that was apparently empty, and I am a criminal. I'm an assassin. I deal with the criminal underworld all the time. Of course, I'm going to find it suspicious when somebody sneaks off, finds an empty chest, and their pockets look heavier than they were before. And so I was able to insight check him because I was a monk with a really high wisdom score and I was trained at insight. I figured it out, and he got pissy. And so he kept trying to kind of run away from the group. And I said, well, I'm not going to let you. He's like, well, I run faster than you. I'm like, no, you don't. Well, I can bonus action dash. What can you do? I can bonus action dash. Yeah, but that takes key. I said, I can also teleport 60 feet, which means I can go faster than you can. And that doesn't cost a key point. At that point, I think my speed was like 45 or 50 feet. So I'm like, yeah, there's literally no way you can outrun me, and I can run on walls and teleport. So no, you don't get to go off and try and find treasure on your own. And we got into this little argument that we eventually resolved when we actually got into combat, and I helped set him up for some really amazing like crits and stuff, because I would go around and stun things, and then he would get his sneak attack and other stuff really, really easy, and we eventually got over it. But none of that would have been possible if I hadn't had this criminal background that gave me the ability to use thieves' tools, because monks can't use them, and I would have to take a feat to get it otherwise. And it also gave me proficiency in stealth, so I could use the proficiencies I get from being a monk to do something else. I think I used it for insight, because it's extremely useful for the character I was playing. So, and then I also had this class feature, which was connections with the underworld. I can go into a city and know who to talk to get to the kind of illegal places. Like, I understand the criminal underworld, and any city I can go to, I probably have criminal contacts there. Or I can figure out how to make those contacts. And that was unbelievably useful. And so, despite the fact that I was playing a monk, that shadow monks in and of themselves, most people that played them in the Adventures League used to do a 2-level dip into warlock to get devil sight, and then they would use it as this way to just always have advantage in all their attack rolls and have everyone be blind whenever they were around, and they would try to turn them into these kind of damage dealing ghosts if effectively, and it doesn't work particularly well for the monk because they're not damage dealers. But I got to play this very, very different character, and I got to fill a very, very different role in the party than most monks do, and it was all based on the background and the fact that it gave me access to skills that I normally wouldn't be able to get as a monk. And to me, that is good background design. A background should help you to build characters that are different than they are supposed to be, and give you the ability to do things you normally wouldn't be able to. When I'm looking at an RPG, what I'm looking for in general is I want to be able to make very different characters. For me, a good character creation in any RPG is if you can have two people that pick the same class and play completely differently, that's good class design. Because that means that you can play, you're not limited to, well, what are the other people in the party playing? Unlike something like, the Power Rangers RPG, you can only have one Green Ranger, one Yellow Ranger, one Blue Ranger. And while, yes, there is a fair amount of customizability in it due to the various perks that you can get that will make your character play differently, in the base book, it really wasn't. And that, to me, was very frustrating. When they got G.I. Joe and Transformers and started adding focuses to the classes, that made it a little bit better, but it still was a little bit limiting because the classes were still going to play the same. You really had to lean into your origin and your other part that I can't remember what it's called. What's it called? Let's go to Power Rangers. Here we go. Influence. There we go. Influence, which is their version of backgrounds. So, for me, a good background should be more skill focused or kind of out of combat focused, and there should be something built into the background that lets you do something that you couldn't with another background. And the ones that do it the best generally give kind of generic bonuses that can be used in a lot of different situations. Again, I think Essence 20 does things really, really well. So I'm just going to do an example from there, like the caretaker influence. Their influence perk is you gain an edge for all medicine and group checks, and give an edge to those you aid with lend assistance. So basically, anytime you're helping someone else, you're giving them edge. And edge is advantage, effectively. And so there are so many different places where that is going to be useful. And it's going to be useful at level 1. It's going to be useful at level 20. Advantage is never a bad thing. And so one of the reasons that the Essence 20 system is so good at creating origins and influences that are useful throughout the entire game is they have all these different ways to kind of reward the player for creative thinking. They have the edge and snag feature, which is advantage, disadvantage. They have upshifts and downshifts. And then they also have story points. So they have 3 separate things that are almost always useful. Advantage, disadvantage is always useful, and that is something that exists in D&D. But upshifts are always useful because it basically means that you get to roll a larger die, or sometimes multiple dice. And then story points, again, are just always useful. And there are specific abilities that require you to burn a story point in order to do something really, really cool. And then there's other ones that if you do something, you just get a story point. So by having those various different things, you can create these backgrounds that instead of just going, well, you get a +1 bonus to stealth checks. I mean, yeah, that's okay, but it's passive, and it's really not going to feel that influential depending on your character as you get to higher levels. A +1 bonus to stealth for even like a level 9 rogue really isn't that big a deal, because at that point they've got reliable talent, which means they're never rolling under a 10. They more likely than not have expertise, so their bonus is already something like +8 or +10. And so going from a +9 to a +10, you're going to be beating the checks no matter what. So yeah, like I said, I've just been really kind of fixating on game design recently, and just the idea of what I think is good and what I think is bad. And like I said, I actually think the original 5th edition backgrounds are actually really, really good, and I love using them in the characters that I make. I think one of the backgrounds I chose for the one time that I got to play a character in a game, that game unfortunately shut down. I was playing a Battlemaster fighter who used cards for weapons. He'd throw them. And he had the gambler background. And the background feature for that was basically anytime there's a game of chance or something random, I could basically ask the DM, well, what do I think would be the right thing? And I would have a better than average chance than other people. And there's just tons of places where you can use that. I used it, and we never went to a gambling hall in the 4 or 5 sessions that I played with them. But I used it a lot. And again, the reason that Wizards of the Coast kind of moved away, in my personal opinion, from that was that they never incorporated backgrounds into any of the Adventure League adventures, and they didn't incorporate it into any of the published adventures. It never would say, if somebody has this background, then they can do this, or somebody has this background feature, then they can do this. They never even mentioned any of that stuff. And so because of that, players thought that the backgrounds were mostly useless. And so instead of trying to capitalize on what was already a good thing, they went, okay, well, what do you guys like? We like feats. Feats in 5th edition are designed to massively change how you play your character. That's why you only get one every 4 levels. And for the most part, they are game-changing. The dual wielder feat seems relatively basic, but it becomes game-changing very, very quickly. You can draw and stow 2 weapons at the same time. Is huge. You can wield one-handed weapons that aren't light. That massively increases the various weapons that you can dual wield with, and that includes magic weapons that can start getting really interesting. And then it gives you a static bonus to your AC whenever you have both weapons out. So that is a game-changing thing. It's going to massively change how you play your character. Other feats like the tough feat, isn't technically massively game-changing. It's just insanely useful. You get an extra 2 hit points per level. It's just useful. And so they decided that instead of trying to kind of use a system that they'd already designed, they're like, no, we're just gonna forget this, and we're gonna go with feats, because people like feats. People don't care about backgrounds. It would take us too much work to actually make people care about backgrounds. So this is how we make people care about backgrounds. Let's make the backgrounds give them mechanical benefits. And specifically, most of the feats that are included with the newer backgrounds give you combat abilities, because that tends to be the thing that a lot of people focus on, which I hate so much. It's one of the reasons why people think monks are underpowered. They're not. They're just not damage dealers. And it's one of the reasons that a lot of people consider druids to be both underpowered and overpowered, is because the only thing they think about is how much damage can I do or take in combat. And that's all they do when they think about class balance. And you see this constantly on D&D YouTube, is people talking about, well, this is underpowered because look at how much damage it does. Well, what about all the other things that you can do with the class? Well, it doesn't matter. So, yeah, backgrounds. In my personal opinion, I like a 3-step process for character creation. I like having a lineage that gives you something physical for your character. I like classes in general. I really enjoy class-based RPGs. I think they're a lot of fun. And the class will give you direction as to how your character should interact in combat. The vast majority of your abilities for combat should come from your class. And it will help you interact with the world and figure out how to interact with the world. And then the background really should be a way to kind of customize how your character interacts with the world. And I don't think it needs to have combat mechanics built into it. I think it's significantly more interesting for it to be mostly skill-based, because, again, everyone focuses on combat because almost every single rule book, the largest section of the rule book is going to be combat because it is the most complicated aspect of any RPG. Running combat is complex. And so a lot of people will people will incorrectly try to infer that because the largest section in the player's handbook is combat, that and so many of the rules for classes are all combat based, that D&D 5th edition is a combat simulator. It's not. It's just you don't need as many rules to run social encounters. You just don't. That was one of the problems that you had with 3rd edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition, is they made so many rules that a lot of times you couldn't do a lot of things you wanted to do simply because it because it caused simply because there was, wow, my brain just left me, guys. Simply because there was already a rule for it, or there was an ability that you had to get through a feat somewhere. And so if you wanted to do something interesting, it'd be, well, actually you can't do that because this rule states that you have to use this for it and this thing, and this feat gives you the ability to use that for that. And so no, it's not possible. And it just really wasn't necessary. Social encounters and exploration encounters already are very roleplay heavy, and are already, like, by definition, should be things that the DM has to rule on an individual basis. And when you create too many rules for social encounters, it takes away the power of the DM to let you do interesting things and use things in interesting ways. And it limits all of the skills to being less useful, because kind of like the idea, if there is, like in 5th edition, if you want to disable a trap, you make a Thieves' Tools check. If you want to pick a lock, you make a Thieves' Tools check. In Pathfinder and in D&D 3rd and 3.5, in order to pick a lock, you actually have a lock-picking skill. And to disable traps, you have a completely separate skill for disabling traps. And then you also have a separate skill for setting up traps. And because of that, if you wanted to use your Thieves' Tools to do something weird, like let's say, trying to think of something weird you could do with the Thieves' Tool. Like maybe you wanted to use your the Thieves' Tool to basically make an alarm. You know, a really simple, like, alarm setup so that you guys can know if someone is coming behind you. Very easily you could use a set of lockpicks and stuff as just kind of precision tools to make something very intricate and small. So that would be something easy. You can't do that in 3rd edition because they go, well, that's actually setting up a trap, and you wouldn't use your Thieves' Tools for that. You wouldn't use the lockpicking skill. You would use this particular skill, and if you haven't invested the skill points in it, there's nothing that you can do. And so that makes lockpicking significantly less useful, makes trap disarming significantly less useful, because you can only use that skill for one thing only. So more broadly defined skills are always going to be more beneficial to the player. It does mean that the DM has to rule on more things, but overall I think it just makes it better. And that's what I think Background should focus on. They should be relatively vague, but give enough direction so that they inspire you to use your abilities in creative ways. Again, talking about the charlatan in 5th edition, a lot of people read that and go, well, I don't care if I can, create a deed. Why I don't want to own my own castle. I want to go kill dragons. That's stupid. Okay, yeah, sure. If that's the only thing that you think about forging a document is like, wow, I can create this certificate of authenticity and try to pass off this sword as the sword that slayed this white dragon and sell it for 1,000 gold. Well, it just seems stupid and cheating. Okay, sure, yeah, you don't want to do that? Perfectly fine. What about trying to get into a place that you're not supposed to be, and so you're able to forge documents that say that you're working directly for the king? That's unbelievably useful. Or, there's just so many different ways. You go into a store and you see something there. You see like a magic set of armor or something, and you go, oh, what's that? Oh, this is this armor that was commissioned, for this particular person. Oh, guess what? I'm here to pick it up for them. No, you aren't. Oh, yes, I actually have a letter of... And, you have this forged thing, and now you can steal something you would never have been able to steal before if you're a rogue. Like, there's so many different ways that you can use it and do really cool things. So, anyway, wanted to talk about that and why I like the idea of backgrounds. Because, again, it means that your characters are going to be that much more interesting. Anyway, that's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.